Right. Well, good afternoon, good morning, whatever it is. Welcome everyone to our meeting this July. Yes, we're in July. I'm very behind and I'm still in June mentally. It's a great pleasure today to have Dr. Dan Batovici from the Catholic University of Leuven, where he's a senior research associate in the Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies. And he specialized in reception of early Christian literature, and he's at the moment completing a project, a 4-year project on the reception of the Apostolic Fathers in Coptic, Syriac, and Armenian. Wonderful subject. His title today is Finding a Home, the West Syriac Context of the Clementine Epistles on Chastity. Well, this will be very exciting to discover where this home is. So, Dan, over to you. Thank you very much for coming to us.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for the generous introduction, and thank you very much, Thea, for your kind invitation to take part in this context and give a paper from my research. Before I start, I'll just say that the context for this research is a project that I won recently in Vienna from the Austrian Academy of Sciences for a 5-year project to work on not the Apostolic Fathers, but the whole literature attributed to characters with a claimed apostolic connection. So it will be a bit of the Apostolic Fathers, but also the writings that will come are later on which some in the room have worked, like on the life of Polycarp, Alistair, and also, of course, also characters like Thecla of Iconium and Dionysius the Areopagite. These are names that have created a lot of literature all throughout Middle Ages, and I won a grant that will allow me to put together a team for 5 years and work on various manuscript tradition of this. And for that, my paper today is one of the starting points. I shall start by sharing my PowerPoint. I trust that everyone is seeing it. But very briefly, today I will discuss about a bit the titles of the 2 pseudo-Clementine letters. I will turn then to the history of printing these letters in the last 200 years. Then I will turn to the manuscripts, and I will conclude by trying to produce a broader context for why is that happening in West Syriac context. For titles, there are several in circulation for these 2 pseudo-Clementine letters. You get to the Virgins, and some languages that still keep the genre. This is in the genre. The genus is still in the feminine. In German, you can still find descriptions of this word as the letter to the Virgins in the feminine. When you get, this is taken from the salutation. The salutation of the first letter contains a couple of things, and the last 2 of them are to the Virgins, brothers, and Virgin sisters. Then another title in circulation is On Virginity. This is a thematic title. I would propose On Chastity, just because the view on these things that is reflected from these letters is more complex. It's not only an anatomical detail. We can probably go with that a bit as well. But for all purposes of this paper, I will refer to the 2 letters as 3 and 4 Clement, for the same reason for which we have in scholarship First Clement and Second Clement to refer to the other 2 letters, older letters in Greek. Like them, the 2 letters on chastity are fraught with problems of authorship, and the shorthand to go with that is to just say 3 and 4 Clement. The manuscripts do only, for a name, only present that just say the Syriac manuscripts say the first and second letter of Clement. And the only thing that comes closer to a title is in a collection of Florilegia in British Library, additional 156 of the 6th century, where there is an excerpt from what I'm calling Free Clement, and where the title reads, in the picture on the top, we see the bottom of the first column, and then the picture below, we can see the beginning of the next column. And it reads, of Clement, the Bishop of Rome, from the first letter about chastity. But this is also a descriptor of the topic, so not necessarily a full-on title. And with this, I turn to the printed history of the letters. In 1752, one manuscript of the 15th century is brought to Amsterdam by James Porter, who was then the minister of the British Empire in the Ottoman Empire, and for some reason from Aleppo is bringing this manuscript to Amsterdam. At that time, Johannes Wettstein was an instructor at the Remonstrant Seminary, and he was editing his edition of Greek New Testament. And getting this manuscript in his hands, he decided to print it along with in the second volume of his Greek New Testament. And he does so at the end of the book, but in the Syriac order. So he's printing, you see the front page on the right, he's printing with a different printer in Leiden, just the fascicles with the 2 epistles, Proto-Clementine Epistles from right to left. So in the order you would find them in a manuscript, and they are in a Syriac manuscript, and they are appended to the second volume of the Greek New Testament that he was printing in Amsterdam in the same year. And this is the first print. It is also the only manuscript known to date, in the sense that this is the edition that has been, this is the manuscript that has been used for subsequent editions, and they're always based on only one manuscript. So after Wettstein published this in 1752, Galandi also edited the Syriac text in his first volume of the Bibliotheca Veterum Patrum. This is what Min took up in the first volume of the Patrologia, and he prints there as the genuine letters along with the others. The last critical edition, the most critical of this group, and in any case, was published in 1856 by Jan Beelen in Leuven, as it happens. This is the edition used today whenever scholarship refers to the Syriac text of the 2 epistles of Clement. It is this edition that we have in mind, and which is based on the 15th century manuscript. After the Syriac text was published, it was possible then for scholars to identify quotations and fragments of the 2 letters in other languages. Cotterill was the first one to publish a series of excerpts from in 1884, found in the Antiochos of Mar Saba, the Pandects of the Holy Scriptures. There are several excerpts from these letters, and they are given the way in which Antiochus writes, but never signaled as such, but on the basis of the Latin translation, modern Latin translation in circulation, Cotterill was able to identify several. This was the last one to complete the list was Decamp in 1913, who updated the edition of Funk, and he has 29 Greek fragments from this letter that he identified in the Pandects of Antiochus and published them in this edition. Next up, Lefort, Jean-Luc Lefort, he identified a series of fragments from one codex of the third of Clement, and he published them in 1952. There is the latest scholarship on these fragments, either Greek and Syriac. I'd like to signal them because it's not mainstream sort of publication. Sara Giorgetti, she published an article precisely on the Greek witnesses and the Coptic witnesses of the pseudo-Clementine letters. And she also completed last year a PhD thesis on the whole text in Syriac, in Greek and Coptic, which is awaiting publication. I haven't seen the PhD thesis, only the article. It is also interesting to see where that fits in the history of the publication of the other first and second Clement. At the moment when the manuscript arrived in Amsterdam, all we had from first Clement was the text in Codex Alexandrinus. It was published in 1633 by Patrick Young, who was then the librarian of the king. But this text was partial, so we didn't have the whole of first or second Clement in Greek. It is only after Beelen even published his last edition of 3 and 4 Clement that Bryennios found the manuscript Panagiou Tafu in 54 that gave us a couple of other texts, including the Didache. And then in 1899 was published by Bensley the Syriac text of first and second Clement. And however, this is after Bensley's passing, and already in 1877, Lightfoot had published in his first volume the results of the initial study of Bensley linguistics and linguistical analysis and codicological analysis of the two letters. I will turn now to the manuscripts, and I will start with the only one witness of the first and second Clement in Syriac. This is a manuscript in Cambridge, additional 1700, was completed in 1169 or 70, and after it was purchased for the UL in 1876. This contains the 4 Gospels, a Passion Harmony, Acts, the Peshitta text of the Catholic Epistles, Jude, the major Catholic Epistles. I'm making a confusion. I will get to this later, but it contains first and second Clement after Jude and before the Pauline epistles. The texts in this manuscript are divided in 3 sections in the table of readings at the beginning. The manuscript is not only a continuous New Testament manuscript, but also liturgical manuscript. It has lections divided throughout. And the way this goes is that the 4 Gospels are grouped with the Passion Harmonies, and then Acts with the Catholic Epistles and first and second Clement are grouped together in the second group, which is called the Acts of the Apostles, and then the Pauline Corpus. The title of first Clement is here the Catholic Epistle of Clement, the disciple of Peter, the apostle to the Church of the Corinthians. And the title in red ink continues with the liturgical designation. This is the 94th lection for the 25th Sunday after resurrection. And this goes on in both letters. The readings in first and second Clement can be rearranged chronologically, and it would look like this. 15 of the 17 readings are according to the Easter calendar. So it depends on the date of the Easter. It starts on the 25th, Sunday after resurrection, and ends the 15th reading in the 39th, Sunday after the resurrection. And this would be, depending on the date of the Easter, probably start around October and end towards the end of the year. There are also two other readings in first and second Clement that are not linked to the mobile calendar. One is for the funeral of the dead, so presumably something that's read at the funeral. And the other one just said that the reading for the Mother of God. I cannot link it to any of the several dates for Marianic celebration in the Western Syriac calendar. A little note, Wright's catalog describes the table of readings at the beginning of the manuscript, saying that we are lacking the end for the middle section and the beginning of the readings from the Pauline corpus. However, they are there, and with them both the ending of one section and the beginning of the other, and with them the list of readings from first and second Clement. They start here in the red form, and that I put at the bottom, and continues for most of the next column. I turn now to Lightfoot. What Lightfoot makes of this, after he describes all the situation, based on Bensley's notes, he goes like this. As a result of these facts, it will be evident that, so far as regards the scribe himself, the Clementine Epistles are put on absolute equality with the canonical writings. Here, for the first time, they appear not at the close of the volume, as in Codex Alexandrinus, but with the Catholic Epistles, the position which is required on the supposition of perfect canonicity. However, this is a strong statement, but then he moves on to qualify it by showing that this is an isolated occurrence. It's only here that we have first and second Clement in New Testament manuscripts, and even in New Testament manuscripts of that century, and even more, he offers examples of New Testament manuscripts copied in Edessa, like this manuscript. There are probably other ways to imagine how first and second Clement stand apart in this manuscript from the letters with which they are grouped. Like the general title in the table of lections for Acts, Catholic Epistles, and first and second Clement says the table of lections from the Acts of the Holy Apostles. This is the general title. But the colophon on folio 216 on the top here, left, says this book that is full of life of the gospel and of the Acts of the Holy Apostles and the two epistles of Clement, along with the teachings of Paul the Apostle. So the scribe would regard, would put them with the Catholic epistles, but also worthy of separate mention. I turn now to the manuscript that Wettstein and Beelen used, the Amsterdam manuscript. This is a 15th century manuscript, which is in a different institution in Amsterdam, is not in the Remonstrant Seminary anymore, and it bears a different numbering, a shelf number you can see on top. What happens here is a bit different than in the previous manuscript. The Clementine letters are added at the end, but also this is the manuscript with the Peshitta text. It has it starts from Acts, so it's either the second volume of a two-volume codex or the second half of an initial full-on New Testament manuscript. So it starts with Acts. It has the major Catholic epistles of the Peshitta text, the Pauline epistles of the Peshitta text, and then the Philoxenian 2 Peter, 2 and 3 John, and Jude. And after that, we also get 3 and 4 Clement. Lightfoot has an opinion about the standing of this text in this manuscript as well, and his conclusion goes like this. This is possibly due to a mistake. A Syrian transcriber, finding the two epistles of Clement mentioned at the end of some list of canonical books, might suppose that the two letters with which alone he was acquainted were meant, and thus assign them to them this quasi-canonical position in his manuscript. As I will show in the following, Lightfoot was, as often the case, both right and wrong. But at the bottom of the page on the right, I'm showing the title as it appears in this manuscript, the first letter of the blessed Clement, the disciple of Peter the Apostle. No mention of Catholic at this point. So the mistake. If this is a mistake, it's definitely not an isolated one, even though the text of the two epistles is known from the Amsterdam manuscript. My working list at the moment contains 9 manuscripts. 7 of them are New Testament manuscripts, most of them, 7 out of the 9, and 2 of them are only with for Clement. These are different type of manuscripts, homiliaries, I think. And it is remarkable because we do not have for second Clement anything similar. All instances where second Clement is found in a manuscript, a continuous manuscript, it's attached to to first Clement. For Clement, the second letter on Chastity has a bit more luck and also works alone in at least 2 witnesses, of which one is somewhere between the 15th and the 17th century. So from this list, one can gather that the Amsterdam manuscript is not the oldest. There are at least 2 other manuscripts that are of the same age, and there is also one manuscript that is older, significantly older, of the 13th century. Of course, as always in this case, in such cases, the SOP manuscript 39 is incomplete as far as the 2 letters goes, but it has fragments of both of them. This is a table that shows, it's a lot of information here, and it's not the most friendly one to the eye, but it is a table that gives the types of New Testament collections and in which Clementine letters are included. So to start from the left, I started with first and second Clement, for the only ancient witness of that situation. What was the case there is that the 7 Catholic epistles are the Heraclean text, and then they're followed by first and second Clement, and then Paul of, again, the same recension. The oldest witness in our group is also the SOP 39, is also including 3 and 4 Clement in a Heraclean text of the Catholic epistles and of Paul after all of them. The rest of them tend to be a Peshitta text with Philoxenian minor Catholic epistles. And first, third and fourth Clement appear in various positions, and they can be grouped at the bottom in 4 ways. The Clementine letters appear in 4 different configurations of New Testament in Syriac. So it's either the Heraclean text of the Catholic and Pauline epistles, followed by 3 and 4 Clement. This is the oldest witness. Then first Clement is in the Heraclean text of the Catholic and Pauline epistles, with first and second Clement before Paul. And then you get the Peshitta major Catholic epistles and the Pauline epistles, follow the Philoxenian minor epistles and 3 and 4 Clement. This is the manuscript from Amsterdam. And then you get a group of 4 manuscripts that all of them have the Peshitta Catholic and Pauline epistles with the Philoxenian minor Catholic epistles with 3 and 4 Clement before Paul. And this is something that happens between the 15th and 20th century. They are a peculiar type of collections that's not only the New Testament, but also exegetical treatises throughout. So for the Gospels, you get Gospel text on one column and then exegetical texts on in smaller font written on the other larger column. So it's a complex tool, but one that was productive between the 15th and 20th century. Andy Hilkens is working now, I believe, soon to publish history of the dynamic between all these collections. I'll just point one little thing, that the Kona manuscript that was copied in 1898 in Mosul, and the John Rylands Library Syriac manuscript 10, copied in 905 in Mardin. They must share some intersection before getting to the places where they are now. What you can see here are not illuminations, manuscript illumination, but transfer stickers. Presumably both manuscripts were in the same place where somebody was keen on applying medieval themed chivalry images in such manuscripts. I turn now to the possible canonical list. This is the 85th canon of the Apostles, themselves being the 47th chapter of the 8th book of the Apostolic Constitutions, where a list of all Old Testament and New Testament is given, and the relevant part is here. It's after other things are mentioned, then the 3 letters of John, 1 of Jude, 2 of Peter, 2 of Clement, and the constitutions addressed to you, bishops, from me, Clement, in 8 books, which are not to be published for everyone given the mysteries in them. And the Acts of the Apostles is just a very peculiar type of canonical list, one that puts themselves there. Clement is addressing writing this canonical list and adds in not 1 but 3 works of his as he is addressing his readers. It's a bit of surprise that Lightfoot does not try to make this connection, because he turns to this canonical list to explain the presence of 1st and 2nd Clement in the Codex Alexandrinus in Greek, the 5th century. And his parallel is there, the Coptic shape of this manuscript, of this canonical list in the apostolic canons. The Coptic text of the apostolic canons was published by Tatum in 1848, and it has precisely the order of books that you can find in Codex Alexandrinus, with the Catholic epistles followed by the letters of Paul, the Apocalypse of John, and then the 2 letters of Clement. But the fact is that the canonical list in the 85th canon has different shapes in different traditions. And this is here for the Coptic, for the Greek, and 2 examples from Syriac. The Coptic, as I said, places the 2 letters of Clement at the end. The Greek places them before the Acts of the Apostles and no revelation. The peculiarity of the Syriac in 2 types of lists that I've seen to transmit it place also place the Acts of the Apostles after the Clementine writings, but in all of them, peculiar to the Syriac form of this canon is that they virtually always follow the letter of Jude. And this is the case for most of these manuscripts that I discussed in the first place. In all of them, the Clementine, with the exception of SOP 39, which is the older of the group, where 3 and 4 Clement follow Paul. In all of them, they are linked to Jude. There could be a problem with SOP 39. So far as I can tell from the pictures, I have not seen the manuscript. There are no page numbers. It would be very helpful if a colleague who gets to look at the manuscript could confirm that those pages, such as they are, few, remaining are belonging to the end of the manuscript and are not displaced from within. And the interesting thing is, of course, after you get these canonical lists in Syriac, is the fact that you eventually also get the 8 books of Clement in biblical manuscripts. The oldest example and probably the most famous is also in Cambridge, the so-called Buchanan Bible. This is a 12th century Syriac biblical pandect that has the Old Testament, the New Testament, and after that, the 6 books of Clement, which is, by all accounts, a collection that is essentially the 8 books of Clements, and which has illustrations throughout of both female and male authors and the main characters in the Bible, including Clement towards the end, to the right here. The 8 books of Clement in the Octateuch of Clement in the Buchanan Bible is incomplete, so it was not possible to check how does the canonical list included in it at the end look like. But I extracted it from a similar manuscript, Syriac biblical pandect, that has the Old Testament and New Testament and the 8 books of Clement of the 15th century. And the list looks as I showed it earlier, where after the Catholic Epistles, you get the 2 letters of Clement, the 8 books of Clement, and then the Acts of the Apostles. So it's the same thing. But the order of books in the Buchanan Bible is Acts, right after Paul. It has the 4 Gospels. It has on the right, there's the table on the right. You get the 4 Gospels, then the 14 letters of Paul, Acts, the Catholic Epistles, Jude, and then the 6 books of Clement, as is the case in the 15th century manuscript. Now, with regard to the standing, I'm going to quote a more recent author, David Taylor. He says, the Clementine Octateuch was included, although this is usually now forgotten, at some point prior to the 12th century in the canon of the Syriac Orthodox New Testament, as recorded by Bar Hebreus in his 13th century Nomocanon, and so was included in Syriac biblical pandect manuscripts, such as the 12th century Buchanan Bible in Cambridge, and then the other manuscripts of the 15th and 17th century. The Bar Hebreus Nomocanon is essentially the same, offers essentially the same canonical list as can be found in the Octateuch of Clement in the Syriac shape of it. It's just simplified the phrase at the end about the 8 books of Clement, where it says, the 8 books of mysteries of the Saint Clement, after the 2 letters, Jude and 2 letters of Clement are mentioned, and the Acts of our Apostles. I quote again at the bottom the text from the Greek, translated from the Greek, and the constitutions addressed to you bishops from me, Clement, in 8 books, which are not to be published for everyone, given the mysteries in them, and the Acts of the Apostles. So the Nomocanon of Bar Hebreus is reproducing the same list, somewhat simplified at the end. The connection to Jude is preserved. I'm going to try now to offer brief conclusions. It seems to me from the data that I've looked at in manuscript and in Syriac literature that the inclusion of Clementine letters in New Testament West Syriac manuscripts is a medieval dynamic. Does not belong to early Christianity, but to the medieval Western Syriac Church. It happens after the translation process of the end of the 7th century by and around Jacob of Edessa. The translations of First Clement and Second Clement are usually dated there. The same the translation and even the way it's shaped up the Octateuch of Clement. It's also usually linked to the name of Jacob of Edessa. And the Octateuch of Clement has circulated in 2 ways, both legislative in some ways. One is the biblical pandects that I've showed earlier, and the other one, pieces of it are taken out and included in canonical collections, for which we start having manuscripts in the 8th and 9th century. So in bodies of canonical literature. Both of them preserve the Syriac shape of the 85th Apostolic Canon, where the Clementine writings are linked to Jude. If this is correct, it would be one of those situations where an younger and pseudo-epigraphical text, the Octateuch of Clement, influences the reception of the older text, First and Second Clement, and even Third and Fourth Clement. Given the numbers, the fact that we have in 9 manuscripts First and Second, Fourth and Third and Fourth Clement, it would seem that with few exceptions for the Syriac Orthodox Church in the West, 3 and 4 Clement are the letters of Clement of Rome. None of the witnesses that I presented in that list gives any sign that this may be a mistake. No scribal marginal note to point to what Lightfoot considers a mistake. And I'll conclude by saying that the Clementine letters in these manuscripts came into a context of restoration accumulation. They seem to ride the wave of restitution that happens around the fact that the earliest Syriac translation of the New Testament did not include the so-called minor Catholic epistles. And when you get manuscripts like the Amsterdam manuscript, which is always offered as an example for that, where they are added at the end in the Philoxenian recension, and then later manuscripts integrated at their place, the same text type. It is on this context that it seems to me that the Clementine letters have been gotten around to being included in New Testament manuscripts. And it is because of this association that we even have them today. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was very fascinating. Travel through all these manuscripts and beautifully illustrated. That was a great pleasure as well. Your exploration of the manuscript edition, does it say anything, throw any light on the actual origin of the texts?
You mean the
Of
stemma of the...
Yes, yes.
Well, as you noticed in your article on the Mingana collection, the Amsterdam manuscript and the 4080 of the Mingana collection, they basically exhibit the same text in the first chapter, and that goes on with the others as well. There are minor differences, and I'll be able to say more at the end of these collections. I'm doing full collections of the whole thing. So I'm not sure yet of how to group them very much. It's a bit surprising that the Amsterdam manuscript comes this close to the other group of manuscripts, the biblical exegetical collections, broader things, because the first and second, third and fourth Clement are the only common elements of those manuscripts. The New Testament text in them are different entirely, are different essentials. So they put them from somewhere. Apart from that situation that you also mentioned in your article about the way in which the two colophons look a bit alike. Like they have some commonalities. But I wonder, and I'm curious what you think, the commonalities in between the two colophons, given that these are not similar collections. So the four manuscripts that have that same collection in them, those colophons, I've seen Andy's chapter on that, Andy Hilkens, they do follow one another and develop onto one another consistently. And I wonder if the fact that also the Amsterdam manuscript, which has a different New Testament type entirely, has similarities, might be that around that time in Mardin, 15th century, is a formulaic way of approaching writing colophons that might explain why we had these sort of things. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's certainly possible. It's such a long time since I read that article. I don't remember the details. I think it would depend on well, if one could find other colophons with similar things, that would be very helpful. And you haven't found them in any of the other manuscripts, anything similar, have you?
So the thing that we have in Mingana 480, it appears in all other manuscripts of that subgroup of Peshitta New Testament manuscripts with exegetical texts in the margin. And it is developed from one another. And Andy is trying to put a bit of order in that mess and trying to understand what went where and where they were at some point in time. But which makes me think that because we have more similarities within the group of colophons, that the similarities that we have outside this group in the Amsterdam manuscripts might be due to chance or habit or formulaic language.
Yes, well, certainly there's a lot of formulaic language, and it would depend on, well, many things which one would actually need to look at all the texts carefully again. Yes, most interesting.
Yes, thank you.
And is there any evidence of quotations in Syriac literature of these 2, 3, and 4 Clement?
Nothing comes to mind, but I haven't looked systematically for them.
No, a bit difficult to...
But from the bibliography, nothing comes to mind that people chanced upon them. You get a bit in Coptic. From the few fragments that we have, you get a bit of quotation, I think in a Shenuta homily. but unattributed and also discovered after the Syriac text was published.
Yes.
But in Syriac, I haven't found yet, no. But I haven't done the systematical reading throughout
Yes.
everything just yet.
Yes. I'm always a bit worried about the way people treat these Eastern lists of books. I think the idea of a sort of fixed canon is, well, perhaps a Reformation thing, it became more fixed. And I suspect that a lot of the Syriac lists are much more ad hoc things that people think at the particular time. They're not actually being promulgated as sort of official teaching of what's to be read and what's not to be read. But that's just my hunch.
It is my hunch as well. I mean, my impression as well. The way that we tend to think in scholarship about post-Reformation, in post-Reformation context about the canon is whether it's fixed or not. In Syriac, even in one Syriac church, the Orthodox Syriac Church, you see, as Lightfoot noticed, various types of New Testaments in circulation at the same time, around the same circle, centers of copying manuscripts, and they were in circulation. Some of them without, some of the Catholic epistles, some of them with them put back in, and some of them also with Clementine letters.
Yes, and sometimes even in early manuscripts, you get very odd combinations of biblical plus totally non-biblical texts. Thechner appears in some, I think, 6th century manuscripts along with biblical texts. And I remember when I was editing Isaiah for the Peshitta Institute, there was one, I think, 7th century manuscript where the text of Isaiah was right in the middle of totally other patristic things. So I think that the feeling that you need to have, I suppose, for convenience, all the biblical texts together, what is read in the liturgical tradition, that's another matter. But the idea that you need a fixed canon, I think this is simply wasn't really appreciated, felt.
Yeah. The anguish around the notion of a clear canon was always present, and even today it's not present always in outside the Protestant, however you define, however fuzzy margins you give it. That angst around the limits of the canon is not necessarily there even today, as we know from Ethiopic, and we see in Syriac, and one other things.
Yes, in a way, you need a rival canon, and then people get excited about it. And so, thank you very much, Dan, for this wonderful talk. We shall all go back and read 3 and 4 Clement. At least I shall. It's a long time since I did, so it's high time. Our next meeting is the 22nd of August, and it's Professor George Dimakopoulos from Fordham University on the origin of the first anti-Jewish Good Friday hymns, which will be a very interesting topic. So we look forward to that, and all the best for the summer vacation, if people are taking one.
A bit.
So
thank you
very much again, Dan.
Thank you very much for having me, and very good seeing everyone.
Good.